I'm Christopher Schoenwald, and welcome to Life as a show intently focused on helping people find their professional pathway by exploring and unearthing the details of jobs from around the world. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to throw this out there. I have a channel over on YouTube, Life as a ... which basically hosts highlights from these audio conversations that I have with these great guests. They typically run 10 to 15 minutes, and they're there to kind of present a different vantage point. You know, for people that aren't into audio, aren't into podcasts, but are still looking for career advice, ideas, help, all that great stuff, send them over to YouTube. Like I said, Life as a ... And if you do get over there, I would love that like or subscribe. I mean, it's the best way to let that algorithm know that the content is worth sharing and should be out there. So anyway, I do thank you for letting me plug this a little bit, but I think it's about time to get into today's episode. If we were to rank the most misunderstood career options out there, I'm guessing that the life and work of an actor would rank highly. Now give me a second, hear me out. Sure, we all know what actors do as far as surface level understandings. However, I bet most of you, and myself included here, have a somewhat warped vision of it all. I'd suspect most of us consider the lives and work of the one percenters, insert your favorite actor or actress's name, as the standard experience. But what about the other 99% of entertainers? What do their career and life experiences look like? What's it like to have a successful career in acting while not necessarily being a household name? These are questions I wanted answers to because, of course, they're critical to understand if you're considering this pathway. Well, on today's episode, we have a career entertainer with a resume chock full of accomplishment who is here to share deeper insights on a wide array of topics related to his industry and work. We chat about things like what Hollywood doesn't tell you about starting a career in acting. We also hear about a day in the life, the value of improv skills. Plus, you'll hear some really great stories. And of course, there's also a ton of practical advice to those wanting to launch themselves into the work. All up, we have a lot coming your way, so keep listening. But first up, let me formally introduce you to our guest, and we can do this. Curt Doussett is an actor, television host, and improv comedy expert whose career spans stage, screen, and studio. With breakout roles in Everwood, Touched by an Angel, and as the host of Discovery Channel's Hazard Pay, Curt brings a wealth of experience from both the limelight and the high-wire world of unscripted entertainment. Now, a classically trained musician turned actor, Curt discovered his love for performance while studying at Brigham Young University. And he went on to co-found Comedy Sports Improvo, igniting Utah's improv scene and mentoring a generation of performers with his sharp wit and fearless stage presence. Curt's deep understanding of confidence, quick thinking, and humor in high-pressure environments has made him not only a fan favorite, but also a powerful communicator and storyteller. Whether he's recounting near-death moments on set or drawing parallels between improv and leadership, Curt blends heart, humor, and high-octane energy that resonates with audiences. With all of this noted, love to welcome you to my conversation with Curt Doussett. All right, so welcome to the program. How are you doing today, Curt?
Doing well, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do appreciate you taking some time and joining the program. I can imagine within your industry and your line of work, it sometimes can be a bit tricky to find the time to do these types of things. So again, really do appreciate it.
Either it means I have all the time in the world or my time gets taken an hour beforehand. So I'm either super free or I'm just gone.
There it is. Yeah. These are things that I'm quite keen to get into on today's episode here. And with that in mind, maybe we can step right into it. I do have this first segment lined up, and it's something called Coloring Wikipedia. And as my listeners know, it's a segment I just read off a definition of something related to what the guest is all about. No surprise here. I went with entertainer. So let me just read that off, and then maybe you could comment. Sound okay?
Yeah.
All right. So here we go. Entertainer. A person whose job or role is to amuse, engage, or captivate an audience through performance, such as acting, singing, comedy, dancing, or other forms of public presentation. Short and sweet. And I mean, like, it goes without saying, anyone who's proficient in the English language has an idea of what that word implies. But what I'm after here is more of a nuanced look at it from somebody such as yourself who's, spent a career within the entertainment industry, fulfilling various roles. What would you say to that?
No, I agree 100%. That's exactly what it is. And fortunately for me, I've been able to do it in several different areas and not always planned, but kind of what bobs to the surface is what you end up going with. And this river of life has gone not according to plan.
Yeah. I hear you there. I mean, I'm like a broken record on this program, when I'm speaking with guests from all sorts of, backgrounds and industries and lines of work and it's just living experiences, that is a common sentiment right there, especially when it comes to careers, right? Everyone has this idea or vision of where they think things could go or where they might go. And the reality can be much, much different, sometimes for the better, sometimes in a more challenging sense, but all the same, yeah, the sentiment remains. So, and then this might also be a nice time to learn a little bit more about your background. Certainly, I mentioned it off the top when I was introducing you, but maybe you could share with listeners a little bit more about you and what you're all about.
I'm going to go back to the beginning because it'll either be unbelievable or make complete sense. So when I was growing up, I was a smaller guy, really, really short. And fourth grade year, I came home excited from school because our teacher named Mr. Handelman had shown up to an assembly. And he had all these band instruments out there: trombone, tuba, trumpet, clarinet, flute, drums, everything. And he played each one. And I was like, this is amazing. I want to do that. So I ran home to my mom and I said, I want to play an instrument. She said, sure, which one? And I said, it's the one that goes like this. You play like this. And she goes, clarinet? I went, yeah, sure. So she went and bought a clarinet. And when I opened it, huge disappointment. I thought, well, that the one with the slide and the brass that does this, that doesn't look like it's going to fit in there. And she goes, well, it doesn't matter. You're playing that now. So I kind of got into music and I was really into sports. And then just as I was going into high school, I developed a heart condition. Discovered that I had a condition that didn't allow me to do sports. I had to be on medication and see a cardiologist. And I was going to the emergency room 2-3 times a week for about 2 years before we got me on the right medication. So I had to quit sports and I just doubled down on music. I quadrupled down on it. I started in the ninth grade. I started learning other instruments. I started learning theory and composition. And by the time I graduated, I was going to be a composer, conductor. I wanted to replace Henry Mancini. There was a new guy, John Williams. I was like, this is who I want to be like. So I just went for music and was going to get a master's, a bachelor's. I wanted to get in front of an orchestra. And as I was attending Brigham Young University, somebody dared me to audition for a play. And I was a behind the scenes guy. When I graduated from high school, I was about 5'4". Then I served an LDS mission for 2 years. When I came back from that, I was 6'1". But I was still just this little 5'4" clarinet player. So somebody dared me to audition for a play because she said, the main character is my personality exactly. I was like, okay, great. That's in like 6 months. Good luck finding me. But if you can find me, I'll sure, whatever. So I ended up doing the play. I went to the audition, was so terrified. Before they got to me, I ran outside and I threw up and I went home. She called me and said, where are you? And I said, I am brushing my teeth. Good luck with your play. I can't do it. They talked me into it after about 3 days of calling me every day. And then I started doing theater. At that point, it was easier to get in a play than it was in front of an orchestra. And I ended up at this one theater. I did every single play in a row for 7 years. And then after a couple of years, I started to get into film. Somebody said, your style really lends to film. Have you thought about doing that? And I was like, no, I haven't. I still kind of in the back of my head thought, well, I got to go back and become a conductor, composer. That's what I was going to do. So I opened up a phone book and looked up acting agencies. There was one here in Utah. So I called her, went in. She said, we don't take anybody that doesn't have any kind of film experience or acting and study or had not been doing it for a while. She said, but there is a movie in town. I'll send you to the audition. We'll get some feedback and we'll go from there. So I went to the audition. And mind you, I would only audition for one play at this point, even though I had done dozens. And I was like, well, the last time I auditioned, I threw up and went home and cried. So I don't know how well this is going to go. So I went to the audition. The next day, the agent that I had met with called me and she said, you got the role. You have one line in a movie that's filming here in town called Dumb and Dumber. It pays, a couple thousand a day. And I was like, wow, this is easy. They're going to pay me $4,000 to hang out with Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels. Okay, forget composing, conducting. I'm going to be an actor. Well, that's not exactly how it goes all the time. You don't book anything for another 6 months. And you're going, what's going on? The first one was so easy. So I just started getting involved with more and more film while still doing a lot of theater. Theater is kind of where I learned the grind of acting, and then getting on film sets, doing smaller roles, doing extra work, day player stuff, TV shows that came through. It just turned more and more towards that. And then in 1998, a young lady called the theater that I've been doing plays at, and she said she was opening up an improv comedy club, and she's looking for young men that were funny but natural. And they said, we've got one guy. We've got hundreds of on our list, but we only have one guy that's funny and natural. He does a lot of film, but he does a lot of theater here too. So they gave her my name, and I went down, saw what she was doing. She was getting ready to open in March of '99 a club called Comedy Sports. It's a national company, and she said, "I want you to be the host or the referee for that." And one of my best friends said, I called him and I said, "This really hot girl is starting an improv club," and he goes, "Oh, do it. Improv is the best thing for your acting." So I called her back. She came back over and said, "I want you to be the host of our improv club." And that was 26 years ago. And now we have 5 kids. So
What a story.
figured it was cheaper to marry me than to hire me. So, but I've just continued to host and transitioned probably in 2002 to being representative out of Los Angeles. And then I have started a career down there hosting. I do about 1 or 2 movies a year, but I also host shows like on Discovery Channel, sci-fi, history, travel, Nat Geo, things like that. And do a lot of now through the improv, a lot of corporate training, a lot of keynote speaking. And I'm moving more into keynote speaking and less auditioning out of Los Angeles. So that's the career in a nutshell.
There it is. There it is. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, like one word that sort of stands out to me is serendipity. You know, like from the very beginning, I suppose. You know, like some of these moments probably never would have come about in the way that they did if not for this certain event taking place, or that heart condition way back when, and then getting into music, and then transitioning to this and to that. Like it all sort of flows as you lay it out that way, and as you explained, you can see how these connections sort of like line up. And if one thing was slightly off, well, it's going to send you down a whole different path, right? So yeah, I love hearing these stories because I think it really puts things into perspective for listeners who are kind of like fixated on maybe an end goal, but they kind of forget all these other little steps in between, and also too a lot of the chance that sort of like plays into what ultimately transpires.
My friend that I called before I went down to do improv, I said, "Well, this is basically just a bunch of guys making stuff up." And he said, "No, it's you as a creator and storyteller with other creators creating a cohesive story." My thing was I love to tell stories. I thought I was going to do that through music, ended up doing it through theater, and now I got to do it with other talented people. And I said, "Well, that's terrifying." And he goes, "That's the great part. If it scares you, run towards it screaming and jump on it and splash around and get it all over you." The saying, everything you want is on the other side of fear. Well, yeah, I've been terrified my whole life. So you just run towards it screaming.
I love that sentiment. I love it. I got this other segment here, and this one's getting back to like the nitty gritty of your work, I suppose, like a day in the life. And it's one of the most fascinating questions to sort of ask, just to hear this, obviously, and a lot of listeners certainly enjoy it too. Now, for you, you just explained, I mean, your background and what you do, it certainly would depend on the gigs that you're involved in, whether it's on a film or whether you're hosting or whether you're doing improv. But in the most general sense, like what does, a day look like for you when you do have, say, a gig? And then conversely, like how do things look for you when you're in between work or in between jobs?
Well, most actors are in between jobs, unless you get in that top 1% that just go from movie to movie to movie and then need to take a break. I've got a really good friend. His cousin is probably the biggest actor in the world right now. That's his cousin. And he's been in every movie with his cousin that he's done, either small roles, big roles, things like that. And I look at his career and I said, "You've been working for 35, 40 years. You've had your own movies. You've been on TV, everything." And he said, "I never know if I'm going to work next month or next year. I'm constantly worried." So what does it look like when we are working, which is less than what people think? They're long days. I just wrapped a movie about a month ago. It's in post production now. We have to do some reshoots in a week or so. But if we're filming out, we were filming outside. So call time is 5 a.m. You go get into wardrobe, then you go to makeup, then you go to your trailer and you wait for them to call you. You get breakfast, you film. There's an old saying, this is hurry up and wait. That's what you do on film sets. Hurry up and wait. But when they need you, they need you. And you just have to be ready. I have read hundreds, if not thousands, of books on film sets waiting to be needed. You end up filming. The crazy thing about what an actor does, I get some people now and then that will see a movie or a TV show that I host and they say, "I totally could have done that." And I got to the point where I've had to say, yeah, you could have, but you didn't. I did. I put myself in the position to get the job. I did the work. I've taken the classes. I've gone to the auditions. I've met the casting directors. You totally could have played the part, but you didn't do everything you needed to before that to get up to it. So it used to offend me. I used to think, no, you couldn't. That's only I could do that. I got cast because I'm the only one that could do it. Well, no, anybody could have done the role, but they didn't. I did. I'm the one that went and got it. And so when you're filming, you've got these long days. The hardest part about being an actor, other than getting the job, is at the end of the day, you're doing your third scene, which takes place right before the first scene chronologically that you already filmed during the day. You've got to do a take 35 times. They end up using the 35th take, but making that one as fresh and as strong and as honest as the first take. So it matches up to the takes you were doing for the scene which comes after it earlier in the morning. That's what's hard. That's what people don't realize is the most taxing thing an actor has to do is be consistently fresh and strong and open and vulnerable at the end of the day, after a week, after 3 or 4 weeks of filming, because nothing is shot in sequence. Everything is shot based on location. So if we've got the beginning scene and the ending scene taking place in the location, you're going to film those first. So you got to know what that's like. So anyway, that's what a day looks like. Usually, the most exciting thing about being an actor is craft service, the food that they have just over on a table that you can go eat anytime. That's awesome. But so
There you go. There you
yeah.
go. And how does it feel? Like you sort of like alluded to that sort of like battle, I suppose it must be like in between jobs and like that sort of fear or anxiety possibly, right? Like how do you go about managing that when you're waiting for that next thing to come about?
Well, there's a saying that work begets work. If you're doing work and people are seeing you, then they're going to, talk about, oh, I worked with Curt on this. He was great. You have a project coming up. You may want to think about him. There's also the other side of that is when you're out working for 6 weeks, you're missing a bunch of other auditions and opportunities. So you have to just realize that some will, some won't. So what next? You got to just kind of work with what you've got, give it everything you can. I was filming a show for Discovery Channel. It was a 7-month shoot. We were getting towards the end, and my agent said, "Hey, Travel Channel wants you to put yourself on tape. Can you do it real quick? You've got the film crew, everything there." So I asked the film crew, I said, "Hey, look, I've got a quick audition." And one of the field producers was like, "We'll do this for you, but just realize that you're here working with us and you're trying to get another job." And of course, they want to keep you to themselves. Even if they don't know if it's going to go or not, they still want to make sure that you're available. And that was kind of a lesson to me of like just head down, hands dirty, focus on the job in front of you. If there's opportunities there when you're done, great. If it's not, there'll be others. You just have to keep working when you're not working to get work. And I know so many amazing actors that just never work because they don't know the business side of it. They don't know how to market themselves. They don't have the interpersonal skills to get an agent, keep an agent, managers, all that stuff. There's a lot to do on your business in the business of acting and hosting. So
Has that gotten any easier to sort of manage? Like in the beginning, there's certainly like a lot flying around and you're trying to like navigate all of this. But as spend years doing this, presumably things would get a little bit easier. But at the same time, like it's so high stakes, right? Getting a job, not getting a job, like obviously that affects your life. Does it get a little bit easier to mentally sort of compartmentalize and
I think you learn so much more about business as you go on. What gets harder is the pressure that's on me externally with, a wife, 5 kids, bills, business. When it was just me living out of an apartment or my car, everything could fit in my car. And, I had $500 a month in bills, and that was a car and insurance and rent and food. It was easier than a mortgage, kids that have cars, insurance, braces, all that stuff. So there's a lot pressure externally, but the business side of it does get better, and it gets easier to say no. 25 years ago, somebody called up and said, "Hey, we would like to book you for." Yes, yes, of course, I'll do it. What is it? Now it's, what is it? What's the rate? Is it worth it for me to be away from my family at this point? No, I'm going to pass on this one. which an agent doesn't want to hear necessarily. But I'm based out of Utah. I have an agent in Los Angeles as well, which is just for all the big stuff. But my agent here in Utah, I'm 4 times more expensive than the next guy in my demographic out of Utah. And I did that because one, I do have, the national credits, the shows that have been on internationally. And people will often ask, well, we want to hire Curt, but we can also hire Chris. Why is there a 400% increase with Curt? And they'll ask me that. And I'll say, because you can hire Chris and you'll get Chris and he'll do a great job. Or you can hire me and you get me. No one can do what I do. If it's teleprompted, memorized, no one's going to be able to do what I do. Getting to that was hard in the beginning. Price myself that much higher and then have to perform. But I may only work 2 or 3 times a month. And Chris, he may work 10 to 15 times a month, but I'll still make twice as much as he does and have most of my time home with my family. So there was a little bit of a learning curve on my end and also on the producer's end and the directors and stuff like that to figure that balance out.
No, I'm loving this insight. I think this is like incredibly helpful, especially like a lot of the listeners of this program are, somewhat younger that are kind of considering all these different options. And I think obviously one of them certainly is, getting into the world of entertainment. And my presumption is that oftentimes like they're hearing or they're only seeing like the flashy side of it, right? But like the reality of it is what you're explaining right now. And this is what people need to know, certainly. Which kind of leads me into this next segment of Q&A Discovery, and I'm hoping we can kind of continue on this path for a little bit longer. In lining up this talk, one of the reps who, was helping me arrange this, at least initially, was mentioning that you have a few topics that you enjoy speaking about. And one of them stood out to me right away, which is this question of what Hollywood doesn't teach you about building a career. And I'm guessing we've already kind of touched on some of these points, but maybe there's a few more that you might be able to share with us.
Like I said, you stumble through this, you learn it by making mistakes. There's the whole taxes. How do I manage this come tax season? What do I do if I can't find an agent? How do I find an agent? And most of the time, you're referred to them or they see something you did that you got on your own. The business side of it is something that I wish it was as clear cut as like being an accountant or a school teacher. You are going to study, you're going to have the business, your taxes are done everything's done. This is 100%. If you're going to do this, you got to figure everything out. One thing I learned early on was to constantly be working on my craft. Once I started doing more and more film work, I wasn't able to be in plays because that would require like a 4 month every night being there. It was a huge commitment and I just couldn't do that. So what I was able to do was take classes down in LA. There are myriad classes down there. One's on acting, getting into the scene. There's ones on how to audition. Boy, that should have been the one I took first. There's ones on how to create a resume, how to do a demo reel. There's a book called How to Agent Your Agent, which teaches you the business of even having an agent. And these are things that if you were to ask somebody, they'd go, oh, yeah, I totally had to do that. No one will tell you that up front. I think the best thing anyone can do that wants to be an actor on any level is get involved in your local theater or local improv, because those are the people that are creating. They're the ones you're going to make connections with, especially improv. If there's improv going on in your town, typically it's not people just trying to make each other laugh, being inappropriate. It's creators trying to work on their storytelling, character development. Filmmakers are involved in it. They're looking for actors. They're looking for comedic actors. Comedy is 10 times harder than drama. And that's where they're going to end up looking. So just getting involved, kind of boots on the ground, go to the classes, be around those like-minded people, take an auditioning class if a casting director's offering one of those. Do everything you can so people can knock on your door. They can call you. Otherwise, they're not going to even know. And even still today, I feel like half the time I'm waiting for my agent to send me an audition notice. Just as recently as 2 or 3 months ago, as far as my speaking goes, I'm going as proactive as I've ever done before in my life with it, even more so than my acting.
As far as getting back to like the improv side of things, certainly this played a big part of your career. And, maybe you'd probably account for some of your success coming from the skills that you've gained while doing improv. Would you recommend that to others to really wholeheartedly sink themselves into, to just like fine tune some of their skills and whatnot? I guess what I'm getting at here is how much would you really push that as a skill for every actor to develop, whether somebody has aspirations of getting into more dramatic type of work or whatnot?
Improv, I do corporate training. I'll come into like a workspace and I will do corporate training with CFOs or managers or team leaders, whatever. And all I do is teach them improv. Improv is the best thing you could possibly do. We offer classes down at our comedy club 4 times a year. And I'd say 25% are people who want to do comedy and get up on stage. Another 25% are people who are there because somebody else wanted them there. A therapist, a spouse. We get school teachers. We get high school kids, college kids who want to come out of their shell. We get managers who want to be able to better communicate. I've got a guy who's one of the top real estate agents, commercial real estate agents in the state of Utah. He came down to do it just so he could better listen to his clients. The improv is, it's not about being funny. I've never, ever once thought that I'm going to be able to teach anybody how to be funny. I can't. It's impossible. What we can do, and this is maybe a little bit down the road from what we're going to talk about, but all I can do is teach you how to be honest, truthful, and fail quickly. That's what it boils down to.
And you can see the transferable skills that you would eventually be developing in going through something like that, right? Like it's obviously like a lot of creativity and being open, openness, and something you mentioned already, like listening, like really intently listening to somebody and picking up on not just maybe verbal cues, but nonverbal cues as well, and responding to it in appropriate ways, I suppose. So yeah, I could definitely see that. As far as getting back to yourself in your career and career development arc and whatnot, improv certainly has played a role in all of that. But what would you say to that as far as you and yourself, landing roles or being able to succeed?
I had an employee, a comedian, ask me, why did I get to do this? And there was other parts of the conversation with that as well. But basically, it came down to I've been on stage, and this was probably 15 years ago. And he asked me how many improv shows have I been in? And so we kind of sat around and we counted. And I think at that point, I'd been in like over 5,000 improv shows. And he said, why is your club so successful? Why is the show so good? And I said, because I have failed so many more times on stage than I've ever succeeded. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, the show that we just did, I failed over 100 times during that 90-minute show. But I've gotten so good at it that no one can tell. And this kind of leads into another actor came up to me and he said, and he wasn't talking about me, he was talking about us as a group. And he said, why are we funny? Why do people come listen to us? And I was like, oh, you got to give me a week on this one. I don't know. Let me go down a rabbit hole and figure this out. What is humor? So when I got back to him about a week later and I said, this is the least sexy thing you're ever going to hear. And it's just, we make connections. All we do is we make connections from the audience. We bridge the audience to ourselves. And the reason we can do that is because we've failed so much, but we survived and we're okay, that our minds relax and we're able to make the connections under pressure. I have probably just during this podcast with you, I have felt myself fail 25 times in what I'm trying to get across. And part of what you don't know is that I have a stuttering problem that was so bad up until high school that I couldn't talk. So when I'm talking and there's just even a moment where I'm trying to, like, it's the Porky Pig thing, 100%. I'm trying to say a word and my mind will pick a synonym or a word that means the exact same, and I'll go with that instead of stutter on that word. There's other little things that I do to help me get through that. But yeah, terrible stutter, terrifying being in front of people. I'm the last person that you would have ever, I mean, if you looked at me my ninth grade year, you'd say, that little tiny guy that can't talk, that plays the clarinet, he's going to end up with a career being in front of people talking and making them laugh. That's not going to happen. And I didn't do that to prove anyone wrong. It's just, that's where it went. That's where life led me. So
Yeah, no, I love that answer, in a lot of different ways. And like that idea too, I mean, like doing that amount of improv, like you're constantly raising that bar. And I like that point too of, you're failing constantly. But as you raise the bar, you're picking up on these like failures that maybe like 10 years ago would have been way more blatant or obvious, but you've just continually been improving and improving and found these strategies and ways of like covering them up or hiding them or finding workarounds for these types of things. That ultimately becomes your skill and it becomes a strength in a way, right? So, like, yeah, I definitely get that. And I think that's a point that, a lot of people, again, whether your aspirations within acting or entertainment are going down this path, this path, this path, this path, it doesn't really matter because they all ultimately connect up, right? Like these skills are transferable, whether you're in comedy, whether you're doing something dramatic, whether it's, hosting a television program, whatever it might be, these are skills you're going to need. So, yeah, I love that.
I'm the most successful failure I know in my family. I'm the best at failing. I can do it better and quicker than anyone else.
All right. We do have another segment here I'd like to step into, a water cooler story segment. And, here just invite guests to share a story that's meaningful to them as far as it relates to their career. So I'm quite keen to hear what you have for us today, Curt.
I've got probably the largest pivotal moment for me as an actor where I had this, oh my gosh, that's what I'm doing. This is what we're doing. The theater that I started doing plays at, they had one in Glendale, California, which I believe is still there, the longest running center stage theater in America. In 85, they moved to Salt Lake, opened the Salt Lake Hale Center Theater. In 90, they opened one in Orem. And in 90, they also opened one in the middle of nowhere in southern Utah, in the middle of a cow pasture. And so every summer, either the Salt Lake or the Orem theater would take 2 or 3 plays that they had done throughout that year, and they'd take it down to their southern Utah theater. And it was like literally just plywood, 2x4s. The doors would open out into, one of them would open out into a cow pasture. The other ones opened out to just dirt, plywood. You could hear cows, you could hear everything. We've had dogs, sheep, mice, rabbits run on stage in the middle of plays out there. It's kind of a build it and they will come thing, but they filled that theater every time they took a play down there. Everyone within 200 miles would come and just be so thankful for these plays. And I was doing a play. This is probably, I'm going to date myself here. This is probably in 1992. Good Lord. But we were doing a play down there. I played the bad guy. I played this big lumberjack Gaston type character. But the leading lady had to do a quick costume change. She had to run out one door, change her clothes, and then I had to grab those clothes and take them around to the front entrance so she could, for the next scene, go out that front entrance and get back into those same clothes. So I am by that back entrance. I gather her clothes up after she does a quick change, and I'm walking through this pasture on the south side of the theater, and there's plywood between me and the audience, and they had kind of a screen that would let in the wind, and they were open just from pieces of plywood that they had stuck on hinges. And as I'm walking, I hear some people just to my right laughing, and they had laughed harder than I had heard people laugh before. And they were laughing at something that had to do with my character. So I was with this group of people telling a story, and something happened. I don't remember what it was exactly. I know that they were making fun of my character, which was the right thing to do because he was a bad guy. And I just sat there and I listened to these people laugh. I don't know who they are. I don't know what their lives were like. They were probably farmers from within 100 miles, struggling. I mean, no one showed up in Cadillacs out there, a lot of beat up pickups. And so as I listened to these people, I thought, whatever problems they have in their life, they don't have them right now. Whatever it is we're doing, we're taking them and giving them. And the way Ruth Hale, the matron of all this, she said, we gave them an emotional bath. And as I walked to the front, I thought, those people are the reason why I'm walking through a cow pasture with a bundle of women's clothes in my hands. They don't have any problems right now. No problems. Every single person in that theater, 300 people, were all the same. We're all equal. You could have a rich farmer. You could have a poor field worker. We're all laughing at the exact same thing. And I was a part of that. And I said, I want to be a part of this for the rest of my life.
There it is. There it is, right? Like, I love that story. I absolutely love it. And I'm glad you shared it. I mean, the thing that you're going to bring up, the word that you use already in this conversation is connection, right? It's creating this special connection or bond between the performers and that audience. And you're right. That's what we love about entertainment. Whether we're talking like a film, whether we're talking a theatrical performance, is like you lose yourself in that moment, whether A, you're the performer, or B, you're in that audience, and that's special. I think that's something that like just humans in general, since the dawn of time, we've been drawn to this sort of special atmosphere or environment. It really does something. And I can see it being a powerful moment for somebody such as yourself when that realization comes that you are part of this very special experience and creating that magic for a lot of people. So, I definitely get that. And I think, it spells it out quite clearly as to why a lot of people such as yourself would commit to a life within entertainment. Is that must be the biggest drug out there, is that feeling, you know?
Especially with improv, because you get to create those moments with an audience, not knowing where the story is going. But as long as you're honest and truthful in your connection with the audience, you get to create that. And it's so disposable too. A play is written, we can film it, you can watch it. In a movie, improv is gone. It happens right then and it'll never happen again. So I love that about it too. I mean, a lot of people don't like that. They can't rewatch it. And even the retelling of something that happened in an improv play, oh, it's terrible. Don't try and recreate something somebody did, even in a play, really. You just have to be thankful that it happened.
As far as like getting into the world of entertainment right now, the day and age we're living in, social media, it's there whether you love it, whether you hate it, it's there. It's probably not going anywhere anytime soon either. But what we're starting to see is that people, maybe performers themselves are trying to hone their craft a little bit on some of these platforms, whether we're talking TikTok, whether we're talking Instagram or something else, even YouTube. From somebody such as yourself and your perspective on all of this, do you think that is a viable way for a younger person to start developing some of those skills and doing it that way as opposed to some other things, or as a complementary approach to, building one's career?
I think it is a valid way to hone skills. I don't know too many people that have, except maybe the top 0.001% of people who have found success on the social platforms that have been able to turn it into longevity. Getting TikTok famous, those people are gone usually fairly quickly. I think the people that build a stronger, wider base, a foundation of skills who in tandem work on the socials or use them to promote some of the work that they're doing, I think can be helpful. But in just my opinion, hoping to get famous by doing, stuff on Instagram reels or TikTok, something may hit and you may go viral. But now do that every month for 25 years and raise a family on it. I don't know who's been able to do that yet.
Yeah, that's the reality of it right there. It strikes me as it being a useful tool to maybe practice some of, the skill development, but as a vehicle for moving it forward, like you said, from a longevity standpoint, well, that's questionable at this point, right? But no, I appreciate that insight. One last question here for you. I know I've taken a bunch of your time. Any parting advice that you'd be able to give, somebody who is interested in the world of entertainment? I know you've shared a lot already, and there's tips imbued throughout this conversation. But all the same, is there any last, messaging that you'd like to get out there?
A really good friend of mine, an actor, his name's Bart Johnson. He won't mind me saying his name. He played the coach and dad in High School Musical. We talk almost every day, and we started acting together. We met doing plays at the Hale Center Theater when we were like 23, 24. And then a couple years later, I think he was probably 26, I decided to stay in Utah. And mostly because I was in a play, rehearsing a play and getting ready to rehearse for the next play. I felt like I couldn't leave. He decided to go down to LA and make it. And he's done quite well for himself. And us talking now, we both kind of get after each other and say, why did we not make the move to do this sooner? What were we waiting for? If we had gone there when we were 17, 18, 19, 20, we'd be exponentially further along in a career. We waited because we got distracted by shiny, fun things that didn't really have any bearing on who we wanted to become or what we wanted to do. If somebody is thinking about doing anything like this, just start, do it. Get involved in plays, call an agent, take some acting classes. If this is what you want to do, then I hit a ceiling here in Utah in the early 2000s, 2002. I got as big as role as you can get. So I had to base my career out of Los Angeles because that's where the raise your family kind of money comes from. I should have done it a lot sooner, but I didn't. I did what I did. If you're wanting to do something, just don't wait. Go do it. Run at it screaming, especially if it scares you. And make mistakes. Make as many as you can. Fix, adjust, change course, whatever. But you can only do that if you're moving forward.
Yeah, some solid advice there. I really appreciate that, Curt. Yeah, this might be a nice point to put a bow on this conversation, but I've got to say I've really, really enjoyed it, and I know the listeners are going to as well. So thanks again for taking some time and joining the program.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I don't often talk about the career, so this has been fun for me to revisit some of those moments. So thank you.
Now, for those interested in learning more about Curt and his work, you can do so via his portfolio website, curtdoussett.com, as well as on Instagram. And for reference, I will have links in the show notes for both. And hey, if you like today's show, please be sure to tell a friend and share to show further support. You can always rate, review, and subscribe wherever you access your podcasts. As I mentioned off the top of the show, I do have that channel over on YouTube, and I would love if you make your way over there and give it a like, a comment, or even better yet, a subscribe. All that stuff does truly help. Now, finally, don't forget to join us on the next episode of Life as you could literally be one listen away from finding your dream job. I'm Christopher Schoenwald, your host, and until next time, don't settle for less. Find the career you were born for.